I want you to picture something with me. Not a church, not a youth group, but a courtroom. Bright lights, cold floors, and the weight of truth filling the room. You step into the witness box. Across from you sits a judge, calm, neutral, unmoved. He doesn't care about your feelings. He doesn't care about your opinions. He doesn't care about how you were raised. He only cares about one thing: evidence. And he asks you a question that has split history in half. Did Jesus Christ truly exist? And did he truly rise from the dead? Not do you believe, not does it inspire you, not does your family believe it, but what does the evidence show? Because if there's no evidence, Christianity collapses. If Jesus never existed, our faith collapses. If Jesus stayed dead, our hope collapses. But the... Get back into serious mode. But if the evidence is strong, if it holds up under a historical investigation, if eyewitnesses weren't lying, if the tomb really was empty, then Jesus isn't just a belief. He's a fact. A historical, documented, world-shaking fact. So today, we're stepping into that courtroom, not to repeat Sunday school stories, but to investigate. This is either the biggest miracle in history or the biggest lie ever told. In truth, it never fears inspection. So let's look at the evidence, a way a journalist would, the way a detective would, the way a skeptic would. Let's walk into the courtroom of history and let the evidence speak for itself. Hey, it's Kenza.
And it's Chloe.
And we're the
Holy Queso Girls.
And this is episode 6. So we are going to walk into a courtroom today. We're going to be looking at the evidence because I did not know the answer to these questions for a very long time. I actually wasn't a Christian until like a few years ago. I wasn't like a Christian growing up. Like even then I grew up around Christian people, like with a Christian family, and I didn't know the answer to this. And it really helped me grow my faith by knowing like, okay, if somebody who wants to know about Jesus asks me this, I will have evidence.
Yeah.
You know? Because honestly, in this world today, you need actual real proof to believe anything. So, why does this question matter? Like I said, if Christianity as a whole, like, comes from the resurrection. So, if we can't prove the resurrection, then, like, there's no Christianity, right? So, even Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, if Christ had not been raised, your faith is useless. So, we're going to be looking and seeing what evidence do we have about Jesus' existence and did he truly rise from the dead? Because it's honestly something that a lot of people have been talking about, and honestly just like an important question for Christians to know.
It is.
So we are here to give you the things you need to know. So, did Jesus really exist?
Let's figure it out.
Yes, he did. Historically, absolutely yes. There is no serious historian, Christian, Jewish, atheist, or secular who denies Jesus existed.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much everybody agrees that Jesus existed.
Yep.
Right? But, here's why. If you want to look at, like, manuscripts and evidence of manuscripts, so essentially it's like what people used to write down, right? So if we're looking at how many manuscripts are, pointing towards this person existing. There's, in the New Testament, we can look at the New Testament, there's over 5,800 surviving Greek manuscripts, over 20,000 manuscripts total, some within 50 to 100 years of the originals, which is super important, because if you look at other things, they're not even close to that. If we compare it to other famous people that we completely trust in, like we know that they existed, Alexander the Great, we all know who he is. The earliest manuscript that we have of Alexander the Great actually existing is literally 400 years after he lived.
Wow.
400 years, guys.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. Julius Caesar, there were 10 manuscripts of his existence. Tacitus, which is like a Roman historian, if you're in history, you know. There's 2 manuscripts. Pliny the Younger, 7 manuscripts. Homer's Iliad, 643 manuscripts. Biblical scholar Dr. Bruce said, Manuscript evidence for the New Testament is a mountain. All other ancient writings are anthills by comparison. So if we trust Caesar's writing, Plato's writing, and Aristotle's writing, we should trust the New Testament 1,000 times more.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at just historical evidence, and okay, if you say, oh, well, it's just in the Bible, whatever. There's a lot of non-Christian historical sources. We got Josephus,
Mm-hmm.
Jewish historian, Tacitus, a Roman historian, Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, Lucian of Samosata, a Greek writer who mocked Christians.
Mm-hmm.
These are hostile sources. These are all sources that did not believe in Christianity, were absolutely not Jewish.
So let me turn so I can see my paper. So Tacitus was not a Christian at all. He was a Roman historian, and he documented the world around him. So in his work, while writing about Emperor Nero, basically this emperor was blaming Christians for the fire that happened in Rome in 64 AD. So Tacitus says in his writing that there was a group called Christians in Rome, and that the name comes from Christus, which is Christ. And Christus was executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius, and the movement started in Judea and then spread to Rome. Now this writing is like a big deal because Tacitus was not a Christian, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is proving Jesus' historical existence, and it has absolutely no benefit to him.
Right.
Like, the fact that he talks about Jesus shows the simple fact that Jesus was a real historical figure, and he walked this earth.
Right. So there are mountains of evidence about Jesus existing.
Yeah.
We just hit the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
With
And
that.
you don't have to just, like, you can probably be thinking, oh, well, all the evidence is just people that followed him, like people who just are with his cause and want others to, what's the word?
Wait, so
Convert. There it is. He
Oh,
wants
yeah,
others to convert. But there's many that have nothing to do with Jesus, that like are not on his side, that don't like Jesus, and they still talk about him, which tells you he was real.
Right, and there's also just archaeological things that confirm like his life in just the Gospels. Nazareth exists. We can visit it.
Mm-hmm.
The bones of Caiaphas, the high priest who condemned Jesus, they're very much real. The Pilate stone with Pontius Pilate's name, first century synagogue, runs in Galilee. Typical rock-cut tombs, exactly how the Gospel describes it. We can very much see that in like archaeological places that are discovered. I don't know what they're called, but here this guy named Dr. John McRae, who's an archaeological scholar, he says nothing discovered by archaeology has contradicted the Bible. That's not a pastor saying this; it's a world-class archaeologist. So historically, Jesus is as real as Julius Caesar, literally as any other historical figure.
Yeah.
Right. So now we want to look into Jesus's crucifixion, right? So this is a huge topic.
Yeah.
Because a ton of people, not like Christians, non-Christians, very much Muslims, they believe that Jesus just passed out or did not actually completely die or did not resurrect from the dead. So this is something that, like, what's the actual evidence? So if a Muslim came up to you today, I grew up with Muslims, trust me. If they come up to you today and be like, no, he didn't, he just passed out and he came back, he didn't actually die.
Just because they don't want to prove that he resurrected, because that would mean that he is God and that he's all powerful.
Right. So this is what we have so far. So a lot of people say Jesus didn't die, he just fainted. It's called the swoon theory. And it falls apart under medical analysis, right? So if we look at, like, the Bible really documents, like, his whole process of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And Lee Strobel interviewed Dr. Alexander Metherell, a medical doctor and engineering expert, who explained why Jesus' death is medically indisputable. And I love how the Bible just very much, like, gives us a bunch of description, because he knew that we would be discussing this and people would be discussing this.
Yeah.
So if we just look at, like, in the story, he gets flogged, right? So if we look at the Roman flogging, like the whip, it's designed to tear flesh, break muscle. Hey, also, if you're not good with blood and stuff, just pass by. So it tears flesh, breaks muscle, exposes bone, causes massive blood loss, and invokes hypovolemic shock, which is essentially just your body's in shock because of everything that it's been causing. So the whip actually contained like metal balls, sharp bone fragments, hooks, and leather strips. Imagine that in your back. That's so painful. And you got like how many floggings was it? Was it 34?
I think it was 39.
39. So after this type of flogging, people often fainted, died, went to shock, lost huge amount of blood. The gospel says that Jesus collapsed. He could not carry his cross, and he says, "I thirst," which is a sign of shock, right? So that's medically accurate. It follows with what should happen. So crucifixion, he was on a cross with nails holding him up and one nail on his feet, but it kills very slowly.
Yeah.
It's a horrible way of dying.
Yeah, it was supposed to take like over like 24 to like 36 hours for someone to die from crucifixion. And it's because it takes so long for you to bleed out that way that it's more of you suffocate because of the way that you're hung. Your body like slowly stops being able to breathe in that position.
So the arms stretched, the chest locked and inhale because you can't really breathe.
Yeah.
To exhale, you have to push up.
Yeah.
You have a nail on your feet, so it's extremely painful. So, and like every breath that you take, it scrapes the back of the wood and it shreds your back. And think of it, he was already flogged, so his back must have been hurting like crazy.
They said it was so bad that he was unrecognizable.
Right.
Like, oof.
And eventually the victims aren't able to lift themselves, so they drowned in their own blood. So, here's this. It's an agonizing slow death by asphyxiation, which essentially not being able to breathe, and heart failure. So this is what is like the most evidence that Jesus actually died. The spear. So we know that the spear pierced Jesus, and John reports that blood and water came out. So do you have any information about that?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. So many people think that when Jesus died, it was not from the crucifixion, but it was because of basically he had a heart attack. Because it's supposed to take like 24 to like 36 hours, however long, for you to die from crucifixion. But it says that Jesus died in only 6 hours. And that's why the guard was confused, and he speared him in the side to make sure he was really dead. And the Bible says when he did that, that water and blood poured out of his side. When water and blood pour out of your side like that, it's a sign that you had heart failure and that you had a heart attack. So to look at that, and after all the physical trauma that he went through, he literally died of a broken heart because of taking on all the sins of the world.
Oh, that's so crazy.
That is insane, dude. But it's also, it fulfills prophecy because Psalms 22:14 says, "I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me."
Wow. That
is so crazy, dude. I am poured out like water. We see that happen with his side. The water and the blood come out. And then all my bones are out of joint. Jesus' bones were not broken. Like, that's like a really big thing.
That is huge.
That goes with another prophecy about the unblemished lamb and all that. And they weren't broken, but they were obviously in pain from all the stuff that happened to them. So they're out of joint. And then it says, "My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me." Like,
crazy. And what's interesting about the broken legs is that every single person that was crucified, at some point, they would just break their legs so that they couldn't push up anymore. And he didn't because he died early, like you were saying.
That's funny. John quotes a prophecy from Psalm, which is the actual prophecy. Oh, it's Psalm 34:20 that says, "He protects all his bones, not one of them will be broken." And then John 19:36 references that scripture by saying, this was to fulfill the scripture, not one of his bones will be broken.
But another thing about this spear is that, so as she was saying, blood and water came out. And there's essentially like a medical term, pleural effusion and pericardial effusion. And those only separate after a person dies.
Yep.
After a person dies.
And the pericardial, it's supposed to be pericardial fluid that came out, and that's something really big with heart attack.
Right. And again, when Strobel was interviewing the doctor, who was the engineer and a doctor, he asked him, could Jesus have survived the crucifixion? And he said, absolutely not. There's no medical possibility. And this guy's not a Christian. He's just a medical doctor. So if the swoon theory, which is the fact that Jesus fainted, for him to survive, he would need to endure Roman flogging, which people already died with that, lose massive amounts of blood, hang on a cross for hours, get pierced through his side, and somehow wake up. Unwrap himself from linens, push 1 to 2 tons of stone uphill, sneak past Roman guards, walk miles on pierced feet, and convince disciples he has risen gloriously.
I don't know about that, guys.
Just with that, just the blood loss of the whole thing would have killed him.
Yeah. There's no way you can be pierced to the side like that,
right,
and not just bleed out.
Yeah, and even skeptical scholars reject this because it's like common sense. He could not have endured that and survived. So another thing that's interesting is that Jesus was buried in a very known tomb, which is Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin was the Pharisees, right? So they were very much against Jesus, and they were trying to prove him wrong. So the fact that he was buried in a Sanhedrin's tomb is important, because early Christians would never invent a member of the court that killed Jesus as the hero, as in like burying or putting him in the tomb. Joseph was wealthy and well known, and his tomb location is public. Like, there's still a place you can go visit. Also in 1 Corinthians 15, the Creed, which we're going to be talking about in a second, dated within 3 to 5 years of the resurrections, says he was buried. So the Creed is earlier than the Gospels, and the burial place is historically verified. So that was written before the Gospels were written. So he couldn't have made that place up from the Gospels. If that's from what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about the tomb, it's also interesting as well, because the tomb being found empty was a big thing, because that's when Jesus, rose from the dead.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is in the Bible, a woman found the tomb being empty.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why this is so significant is because women's testimony was not accepted in court back then. Women were literally nothing back in the day. So the fact that if they were trying to make up a story, they would not have a woman discover the thing that was the biggest thing in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't reasonable, and it wouldn't be accepted or believed. So again, if the disciples made up the story, then they would have a man find it. And the only reason to include women is because it actually happened. And also, the stone could not be moved either. The stone that was covering the tomb, it was weighed between 1 and 2 tons. It was set in a groove and sealed with a Roman seal. A broken seal means execution. So that means you would die if you opened it. Disciples were not bodybuilders. They were fishermen. And they didn't overpower the guards, which is, if you know the story, the tombstone was open and there was an angel sitting up on it telling Mary about Jesus' resurrection, essentially.
Yeah. So one of them his name is Thallus, and he is perhaps the earliest secular writer to mention Jesus, and he is so ancient that his writings don't even exist anymore. But Julius...
Ouch.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
Julius, I don't know how to say his last name. Africanus? Julius Africanus, writing around 221 AD, quotes Thallus, and he says, "On the whole world there pressed a most fearful darkness, and the rocks were rent by an earthquake, and many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. This darkness Thallus, in the 3rd book of his history, calls, as appears to me without reason, an eclipse of the sun." So this quote basically shows that the world went dark the day that Jesus died, just like Mark 15:33 claims. it says, "And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour." So the fact that this dude is literally showing us that there really was an eclipse. I don't know that it was for sure an eclipse, but that the day went dark when it was not supposed to go dark. That, like, he literally gives us evidence that it really did happen, and the Bible is true with that.
Another thing about the eyewitness stuff is, like, as we know, the story is that Jesus, like, showed himself to 500 people. So Paul gives a list in 1 Corinthians 15. He says that Peter was there, so the 12 disciples, 500 people at once, James, who's a skeptic at that point, and Paul, who's an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul was not a Christian at that point.
Yeah. He was Saul at that point.
Right. And he's the one who wrote about this. Paul says most of them are still alive, which means if you don't believe me, go ask them. Because he wrote this while everybody that saw him were still alive. So if he would have written it as a lie, then people would have confronted him about it. Yeah. But that's not really much of a thing. It's just a thing to mention. Because the main, like, theory that goes against this is the hallucination theory, where, it wasn't true and just people hallucinated. Well, we know scientifically and medically that hallucinations are private, first of all. Yeah. 500 people cannot hallucinate at once.
500 people. How desperate do you have to be to claim that 500 people hallucinated the same thing?
Also, hallucinations don't eat with you.
Yeah.
Talk with you. Don't convert enemies or skeptics. They don't explain the empty tomb. So that theory honestly collapses. Strobel says hallucinations don't walk on roads and break bread with you. And I think one of the strongest pieces of evidence of Jesus' resurrection is the disciples' story.
The fact that they all add up to.
Yeah, that, and then also the fact that all of them died an extremely gruesome death.
Yeah.
Because they believed.
Yeah, you don't die for something that you don't actually believe in.
Right. And literally at any point, any of them could have said, okay, fine. I don't want to be crucified. Yeah. I don't want to be...
It was all a lie.
Let me just tell you what these people had to go through. Peter was crucified. Andrew was crucified. Thomas was speared. James was beheaded. Bartholomew was skinned alive. Oof. Paul beheaded. The other ones were whipped, stoned, imprisoned. People die for lies they think are true, but not for lies they know are false.
Yeah.
Peter Kreeft says lies make poor martyrs. This alone is overwhelming evidence that they truly believed Jesus rose. They changed their entire lives as fishermen, as anything to tell people about Jesus. Like, and tell people that they were, like, he was resurrected. And that alone is just incredible.
Yeah. I think it's also easy for us to forget how dangerous what they were doing was. And the fact that you just went through how they died really shows, like, this was serious. Like, this was life or death, and they still chose to talk about Jesus.
But growing up, like, hearing about Jesus, I didn't know about any of this. I also learned it in school when I came to the States. I learned a little bit about it. But it gave me, like, kind of like a standing ground of being like, okay, I actually know what I'm talking about if somebody asks me about it. Mm-hmm. Because I think knowing these things is really, really important, which is why we're sharing this with y'all. A lot of Christians sadly don't know this because we don't know the evidence behind our faith. And when I specifically learned it, my faith, like, exploded. It was like, what? It's crazy. Okay, so here's just some facts that a lot of scholars, like secular, atheists, whatever, scholars agree on. Jesus died by crucifixion. His disciples believe they saw him alive. Paul converted after claiming an appearance. James converted after claiming an appearance, which are both skeptics. Paul was somebody who killed Christians, and the tomb was empty. The best explanation of that is the resurrection. So if all of that is true, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Jesus is who he says he is. Sin is defeated. Death is defeated. Heaven's open. Christianity is true. God stepped into history, and there's hope beyond the grave. Isaiah 53 predicted it. Psalm 22 predicted it. The prophets pointed to it. The gospel witnessed it. History confirms it. And billions have felt its power. Again, is another thing. Is like we actually feel Like, people feel Jesus.
We were just talking in like the last episode about miracles. Like, how are miracles gonna happen if none of this happened?
Right. And there's, like, it's not like we witnessed that, like, that was written in history and we haven't seen any, like, evidence or anything that's happened from that. Like, we've seen, like you were saying, like, miracles and all these things. It's just crazy. But Romans 8 says, the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. This isn't a myth. This is a miracle backed by evidence. A miracle. So, what have we decided in the courtroom?
I think I've decided that Jesus was real.
Yes.
And that he really did walk this earth.
So imagine yourself in that courtroom again. The judge looks at the evidence laid out, which you laid out. Manuscripts, archaeology, Roman history, medical analysis, eyewitness accounts. Empty tomb, early Christian creeds, prophecy fulfillment, disciplines, martyrs, like martyrdom, which essentially like disciples martyring themselves or being martyrs. He gives the verdict. He lived, he died, he rose. Jesus Christ is not just belief. He's not mythology. He's not a legend. He is the risen Son of God, verified by history, confirmed by evidence, and alive today. And the same God who walked out of that tomb is the one who wrote your DNA. As we've said in many episodes before, you're not an accident, you're intentional, and you are loved. Period. And that will never change no matter what.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Which we're going to be talking about in other episodes. But do you have anything else to add?
I think it's really funny how I was saying earlier with the how the officials were trying to cover up Jesus's death. It's so crazy to me how history tries to cover up what really happened with Jesus.
Right.
Like that, what was that thing you said? I can't remember what you said it was called. With them thinking he passed out.
The swoon theory?
Yeah, the swoon theory. Like, it's so crazy to me how people come up with that stuff. It makes me think of the Mandela effect with the Fruit of the Loom. You know what I'm talking about? How, you know what Fruit of the Loom is, right?
No.
Okay, it's a clothing brand that came out.
Yeah, I know. The Fruit of the Loom
It came out in like the 1800s.
Yeah.
And their logo had a cornucopia on it.
Okay.
You know what a cornucopia is?
I think so.
It's like a little basket.
Oh, okay.
So basically,
I didn't know what it was.
I figured you did it. It's like a basket, but it's shaped like a horn. It's kind of weird.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, the logo was a cornucopia with fruit coming out of it, and it said Fruit of the Loom on it. Well, they came out and had this big Mandela effect saying that the cornucopia never existed, that it was never there in the logo. So all these people, like the company themselves came out and said, we never had a cornucopia. So all these people went to their houses and they like dug in their closet and they got out these vintage Fruit of the Loom clothing. And it had...
I remember having one.
It had the cornucopia on it. So all these people are like posting pictures of the cornucopia on the logo. And you can literally find like old documents from the business that has like detailing what the logo looks like. And it has the cornucopia in it. I have no clue why this business has decided to act like they didn't have a cornucopia, but they absolutely did. And it's not a Mandela effect. But if they would try to erase something as dumb as a cornucopia from history, you don't think they'd try to do it to Jesus.
Right.
Like, that is so crazy to me.
It is cool. Crazy, like, if you think about it, the amount of stuff that is done to hide things like that.
Yeah. And
That's crazy.
Well, I mean, you can tell why they do it with Jesus, because obviously he's the one true God, you know?
Right.
Like, the fact that he did resurrect, that is what makes him different from all these other religions and all these other gods, because all of them, they're dead. Jesus is still living.
Right.
It's just cool. Well, I think that concludes episode 6.
Yeah.
Yep, episode 6.
We'll see y'all on the next one. As we always say, comments, questions, anything. We would love to... We were trying to make an episode in the future with all y'all's questions. Anyway.
Bye!